Hi, my name is Pat Adams, a spiritual director and blogger about the spiritual life. The consuming interest of my life has been this: how do we live a life centered in God? And yet deeper still, who am I really? What is my purpose? How do I connect deeply with God? These are the questions I will address in this video series. Today I'm continuing the Exodus story with part 2, In Limbo in the Wilderness. In this part of the story, after the Israelites have escaped the Egyptian army through the parting of the Red Sea, they settle into being led by the Lord in a pillar of cloud during the day and a pillar of fire at night. He led them into the desert, the wilderness, and problems arose almost immediately. By the time they get to the desert of Shur, they've gone 3 days without water. The people grumbled, and God had Moses throw a piece of wood into the bitter water at Marah, which makes the water drinkable. The next stop was Elim, with 12 springs and 70 palm trees. Then they reached the desert of Sin between Elim and Sinai. There the Israelites grumbled about starving to death. So the Lord sent manna in the mornings and quail at night. The Lord led them to Mount Sinai, where he appeared in a smoke-filled cloud and spoke directly to the Israelites through the cloud. After that terrifying experience, the people asked Moses to listen to God for them, and they would do what he asked. Moses spends 40 days on Sinai with the Lord. The Israelites, not knowing when he was coming back, turned to Aaron, Moses' brother, and asked his help in building a god they could worship, Baal, which they forged out of gold. When Moses came down the mountain with the tablets of the 10 Commandments and saw what his people were doing, he broke the 2 tablets, destroyed the statue, ground it into powder, sprinkled it on the water, and made the Israelites drink it. Later he returned to Mount Sinai and spent another 40 days with the Lord, brought back 2 new tablets which he had carved. The Lord sent a plague to punish the Israelites. This is the essence of the story. But the backstory is this: during these few months in the wilderness, the Israelites are neither in Egypt, which they miss desperately, nor in Canaan, which has been promised to them. They are in limbo, and they are grumbling about everything: lack of water and food, which the Lord provides. But mainly they are missing the familiar, what their lives were like in Egypt, forgetting about the slavery, only remembering the abundance of food and water and of being settled. In the wilderness, there is the Lord pretty visibly leading them, but everything else is unknown and probably threatening. The manna is white like coriander seed and tasted like wafers made with honey, a far cry from leavened bread, just another unfamiliar thing. Being in limbo can be caused by any number of situations, from waiting to hear from a job interview whether you got the job, to having a close friend or relative with a terminal illness and waiting to see what happens, or other similar unresolved situations. Or you might just crave the freedom from slavery that God offers us. Limbo is a necessary step in leaving Egypt, which represents the world. We are still attached to the old place and not ready to attach ourselves to the new. So everything hangs in the balance and we feel unsettled by it all. Perhaps the Israelites were surprised that they cared so much about Egypt, but mostly I think they don't like being unsettled. Our attachment to what once was takes a long time to release, but nothing can arise that is new until we let go of the old. So it is a long process of evaluating what is really important and then lending our passions and whole self to the new enterprise. The wilderness represents that in-between place that stands for the massive life change to come. We humans aren't fond of change, so it can take a long time to be totally at home in a new place. It took the Israelites 40+ years to be ready to cross the Jordan River into the Promised Land. We take our time in the wilderness to come to terms with what is appearing in our lives, welcome or not. So what have been the major transitions in your life? What have they been like? Have you gone kicking and screaming into a new life, or been able to embrace it from the start? Have you been aware of the Lord's leading? Here are some of the hallmarks of being in limbo. 1. Being in limbo means you can't make any major decisions until the limbo is resolved. Your lives are suspended, and it is unsettling and disturbing. And so the Israelites, angry at God and Moses for bringing them out here to the desert, turned their backs on God when Moses was up on Mount Sinai for a long time. They sought Aaron's help to build a golden calf and proceeded to worship it, anything that would bring them some peace and certitude. 2. The Israelites went kind of crazy at the foot of Mount Sinai, thinking Moses and God had deserted them and chose to worship another god, Baal. I think this is a natural response to the restrictions of being in limbo. Everything in your life is hanging, suspended. You grasp at straws until things are resolved, and you can once again make decisions about how you'll proceed from here. If the resolution means someone has died, you can start to deal with the death and the aftermath. If a new job has been acquired, then plans can be made for what to get ready for the first day of work. Life can move along finally, no longer suspended. 3. And so we do grumble, caught between two places, the old and the new. We've gussied up the old in our memories and downplayed the new. If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around with pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. Anger, frustration, fear, loss of confidence, and more are poured out. Being in the wilderness in limbo is step 2 of the process, the template God has for getting us out of slavery. But we're nowhere near freedom yet. The desert is a barren and threatening landscape. Water is there, but hidden. There's no place you'd really like to call your home, just prickles and bare soil or threatening animals. Hopefully you've brought everything you need, but you may wish you had the natural acumen of a bushman in the Kalahari Desert to find the water sources and the food. Nourishment will be provided, but it may not resemble what you're used to. The Israelites had forgotten that God had rescued them from a horrible fate. They ignored his presence. They are looking back at Egypt through rose-colored glasses. Part 2 is the first part of the wilderness experience when you're grieving the old and not ready to welcome the new. There's a second part to the experience in limbo, and that is learning what you need to know and getting your life organized to move into the promised land. We'll tackle part 3 of the Exodus story next month. Thank you for watching. I look forward to hearing from you soon.